Hi everyone, and thank you for joining. As Victoria said, I'm going to be talking through how to take a campaign approach to your communications. Just to start, for those of you who may not be familiar with us at Cast from Clay, we are a communications consultancy, and we're specifically focused on policy and research communications. So that's the lens that we're coming at, and hopefully those of you in the audience, that's going to prove relevant to you. And the reason that lens is relevant is because often when we think about campaigns, we usually associate them with, for example, hard-hitting charity campaigns, maybe more creative campaigns that come from corporates that are trying to sell their products, or more of the political campaigns that we see, like this one from Obama. So it's my job today to convince you that campaigns are not just for charities, corporates, or political parties, that they can be used for policy and research communications. And also that the stunts and slogans that people may think means that campaigns are not for them are not actually the end goal of campaigns, but are the tools. And for that reason, to start with, I'm going to focus a little bit in the first diamond of the design double diamond, which is on focusing on doing the right thing before we move into doing things right. And that's because you can find that with campaigns, two things can happen. Either us communicators can get very excited about wanting to come up with creative campaigns that are going to kind of catch the public imagination. Or the type of execution that we see with campaign tactics can really put people off campaigns and say, okay, well, this isn't for us. We're a very serious organization and we don't do that. So I want to talk a little bit about what's actually in the strategy behind these tactics first, before we then move into a bit more about the how-to. So just to start with definitions, what is a campaign approach? What do we mean by that? And here's a definition that we like. It's from a book called Campaign It by Alan Barnard and Chris Parker, and that's well worth a read if you want to get to grips with this in more depth. And they describe in this quite chunky definition a campaign as a planned sequence of communications that makes use of all appropriate channels to achieve defined outcomes in a specific time frame by influencing the decision makers who will allow success. And there's a lot in that, and we are going to break it down. But before we do that, I want to first ask maybe a more appropriate question, and particularly a question that you guys might get asked in your organizations when you maybe suggest the idea of running a campaign, which is why? Why is campaign approach for us? You know, we don't do that as this type of organization. And so from the same book, again, this description I think sums it up. Because there is a definite outcome to be achieved that is too important to leave to chance. So that's a key part of the campaigning approach, is that you have a really key important outcome that you want to achieve. So using the examples that I brought in at the beginning, British Heart Foundation's overall goal is to reduce deaths by heart disease. And clearly they felt that changing behaviours around smoking was really key to that goal, and they weren't willing to leave it to chance. Same goes for Dove and trying to sell their products. It's important to them that they have goodwill and trust from their audiences and from their consumers. So they're more likely to buy their product. And Obama wasn't going to leave it to chance that people would vote for him. So he went out and aimed to inspire hope through his campaign. And to illustrate this further, I want to take you to a scene from cinematic history in the film Finding Nemo. And the reason I picked this is because I think it really sums up what it is to take a campaign's approach, and then talk about that further. So I'm going to try and play a clip. Hopefully you guys are going to be able to see it. Don't worry if you can't. I'm going to talk through what happens in the clip and what that actually means for campaigning. So before I do, just for some context, in the clip, we find Nemo and Dory in jeopardy. They're caught in a net with many other fish in the sea, and they're slowly being hauled up into a fishing boat. So you can see that's there. They're on this big hook, which is slowly winching its way up into the fishing boat. But then Nemo has this great idea, and he tells all of the fish to swim down. So let's see if this will work.
Dory, you have to tell everybody to swim down together.
Okay, so what we have there is that the fish all begin to swim together. And as they do, they gain momentum and create enough force that eventually turns the tide, if you will, on their fate and changes the direction of the anchor and releases them into the sea to freedom. So clearly, for this amount of effort, they have an important goal that is too important to leave to chance. And the effort involved is something that kind of differentiates the campaign approach from more of your day-to-day comms. So if we think about our day-to-day communications, it's similar to the fish to begin with. They are swimming roughly in their own directions. And that's fine when you're out in the open waters and you're generally kind of keeping up awareness about your organization. And each of the fish is kind of achieving its own goal individually within the remit of the organization. But when there's a really, really key goal to be achieved, you need the momentum, you need the strength, and you need everyone swimming in the same direction within your communications to have that powerful impact. So to think a little bit more about the difference between day-to-day communications and a campaign, we have within strategy what we've said already is there's a targeted objective with a tight focus or a single theme, and I guess a specific call to action. And as we saw with the fish, this is typically time limited. You can't keep that intensity day to day, every day, but it's with a specific goal in mind. And usually you're building up intensity and momentum up to a particular date. So this might be a date in the political diary, like the upcoming party conferences, or maybe a UN summit, for example, something that will allow you to have a climax point to your campaign. And you'll be rallying your friends just like the fish did, all collaborating towards the same goal. And it may be relevant as well within your campaign to come up with a tagline, a hashtag, even a campaign name, maybe a campaign-specific visual identity. So a little bit like the fish were all rallied around the phrase, just keep swimming. That helped them to build to this climax and gather the momentum they needed to escape. So where to start with all of this? So to go back to the definition that I started with, I've broken this down because what it does is it describes the what, the how, the why, the when, and the who of campaigning. So again, it's a planned sequence of communications, makes use of all appropriate channels. It's to achieve a defined outcomes, which we've already talked about, in a specific time frame to create that intensity and momentum. And by influencing the decision makers who will allow that outcome to occur. But the way I like to think about this is just to slightly rejig it and think about it a little bit like building a sandwich. So you can't make a sandwich until you've laid your bottom slice. And within a campaign sandwich, the bottom slice is very much your why. Why are we doing this? It's that key objective. It's escaping the net like the fish are doing. It's whatever you're setting out to achieve. It's not starting with, oh, we want a viral video or we have this really great slogan that we have in mind. It's the wider goal that you're trying to achieve as an organization. And that's going to naturally happen anyway, because it will take a lot of kind of time and resource from your organization to run a campaign. So it needs to be something that you value and that matters to you. But you don't make a sandwich because you want to eat bread, you make it because you want the filling. And usually that's motivated by something like you're really trying to reach a particular group of people. So maybe politicians, policymakers, the public, and that's who you need to reach with your campaign. We've already talked a little bit about finding the opportune moment to reach them. So like we said, it may be an important moment throughout the year where the particular topic that you're discussing or raising awareness around is going to be on people's minds anyway, or needs to be in people's minds in order to achieve your particular outcome. How are we going to reach them? So thinking about which channels they're on already and what they may already think about this issue and what messages might resonate. And it's then that you get to the creative outputs like slogans, the enticing imagery, maybe the in-person events, whatever it is that you need to do to achieve this goal. So I wanted to take an example of a campaign that's sort of closer to the kind of policy and research communications. And so I was looking around and spotted some recent work done by IPPR. Now, I should say that we haven't worked with them on this work, so this has all been deduced from a kind of audience perspective, so what I've gleaned from the outside. But this is their recent report for their Fairness and Opportunity, which is the final report from their Environmental Justice Commission, which seems to have been running since spring 2019. And the reason I picked it up as a sort of a example of a policy and research organization in campaign mode is because I went onto their Instagram and I saw this, this grid talking all about climate change. And bear in mind that IPPR, as I understand it, is not a climate change focused organization. They are focused on progressive policymaking. But very clearly from their Instagram, they're in campaigning mode. Everything is tied together with a visual identity. And all of their focus at this particular time is on climate and putting fairness at heart of climate. So I had a little bit more of a think about this and thought about it again in terms of our campaign sandwich. So the why for IPPR, as I would see it, is their overall organization is to advance progressive policies. That's my paraphrasing. If there's anyone from IPPR on the call, feel free to jump in at the end when we have the Q&A and we can discuss this further. And their fairness and opportunity, a people-powered plan for the green transition. Clearly, this advocating for a fair transition to net zero was important to the organization. Maybe it culminated a lot of the issues that they're working on at the time. Maybe it was more about the actual sandwich filling, which is the timing. So when we look at what they actually did, you can see here that they're running up. They seem to be focused particularly on the run up to COP26, which is happening later this year. And potentially they also saw an opportunity in more discussion that's happening at the moment about things like green recovery, just recovery from COVID-19, and trying to again couple the transition to net zero with social justice and fairness. Maybe they saw an opportunity to target the public with this, seeing as there's growing kind of public awareness of climate. Politicians as well were clearly involved and potentially target audience to set that policy agenda in the run up to COP26. And there was a summary for policymakers. It seems like there were around 100 policy recommendations from that work. So clearly targeting a range of audiences there. Like I saw, they were very busy on Instagram with this. So clearly targeting a wider, more public audience with some of their messages, as well as what seemed to be an appearance on Newsnight. So again, different audiences there. And a range of executions as well. So videos from the public talking about what this means to them. All of which culminate, all of which saw them being very busy at this particular time. So clearly a big piece of work, and across their social medias, this visual identity of this particular piece of work was very visible. So another quick example was one that we worked on here at Cast from Clay, which was the high-level ocean panel who were targeting insiders and activists, so policymakers as well as sort of civil society, around a high-profile announcement, which was that 14 world leaders had committed to 100% sustainable ocean management. So this was making this announcement, as well as drawing in wider support for this commitment and the importance of protecting our oceans 100%. And I believe the campaign resulted in interest from more world leaders to join into this commitment. So I'm going to try and finish up to give us enough time for questions. And I appreciate there's lots of information on these next two slides, and they were designed for you guys to either screenshot for your own use internally or for us to send on to you afterwards. But again, we've kind of broken down this campaign sandwich into questions to ask yourself while you're at the planning stage of a campaign. So your why being, if this campaign were to be considered a success, what would have changed? Are you changing awareness, behaviors or attitudes? Who do you need to get permission from to achieve those goals, and what do they already think about the issue? Will a certain timing help us to apply pressure and how far can we realistically take our audiences with one campaign at this particular time? And is there anything we need to do to follow up? Which channels are our audiences on already? What messages will resonate with them? And can we create a visual identity or a slogan or a hashtag or any overarching message that will help really tie this together and have everyone swimming in the same direction? And then creatively, how do we illustrate our messaging in a creative format? Is there an ask or declaration that our audiences can rally around, like the Give It 100% from the Ocean Panel campaign? And then when it comes to doing, again, your why. So this is intended as a bit of a guide or a checklist. Start by defining your objectives and identifying if people are going to take away one message or one idea from your campaign, what would it be? And build up from there. So mapping your key stakeholders, their power and influence, and any leverage points they have. Even speaking to your target audiences to understand where they stand on a particular issue and any messages that resonate or don't resonate with them. When it comes to timing, starting from your kind of key climax date and working backwards, particularly when it comes to the narrative you want to roll out in the run up to that climax. So creating a roadmap of how your narrative will unfold. And remember that this needs to be quite flexible because things may change in the run up. So yeah, you need to make sure that you're refining and updating your plan as you go along. Once you have your overriding message and key narrative, you can then start to tailor and refine your messages. So the messages that we saw with IPPR were different on Instagram, for example, than on Newsnight. So those, again, tailored to different audiences and maybe particularly with different strands of the work that they were trying to get to different people. And these may be different for different channels. Create a grid of kind of daily and weekly activity. You can work in kind of 2-week stints and then plan forward more generally. And then again, keep it flexible and keep revising your plan for key moments and key bits of content that you're going to be putting out. And then getting creative. So it's really great to work with designers at this stage of the what in developing kind of key creative concepts that are really going to be the vessel for the kind of core strategy of your campaign that's going to stick in people's minds, that's going to catch people's eyes, a bit like those examples we saw at the beginning with the cigarette, the Dove campaign and the Obama campaign. But just to say that's it from me, but we, as Victoria said at the beginning, we do have another few webinars coming up that I hope that you guys can join. So thanks for listening.